Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew, happy Tuesday, and welcome to a few thoughts I've been having about constitutional supremacy. The highest law in the land. That was the expression my teachers used when they described the Constitution a million years ago in school. But we have daily proof that this axiom is not actually practiced in our country right now, and we are all the worse off for it. Now, it may be tempting for those among us who feel inclined to consider ourselves doomed and powerless and that it's just a hopeless business and there's nothing they can do. But I'm sick and tired of all that gloom talk. Even if the people who claim that it's realistic consider ourselves beaten, well, I have this to say to you. If you honestly believe that the authoritarians have successfully stamped out the American spirit, then welcome to the rebellion. It is your duty to fight back. And that means actively teaching and spreading American values, highlighting the value and meaning of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Federalist Papers to plant seeds. Don't just lie there like a pathetic victim and let things happen to you. The surest pathway to complete defeat is yielding the field to the enemy. Now, even when the authoritarians experience a setback, as they recently have, they immediately get to work. They want to push back and they plant seeds for their long-term goals. Now, if there is anything we can learn from the leftists is that one should never give up. It's just about the only thing we can learn from those losers, so we might as well make the most of the lesson. Let's stop whining and start doing. Now, one of the reasons why the Constitution is routinely ignored and circumvented is because many people don't know what it says, so they don't realize when it's being trampled on. And shame on them for that. Even if all of your teachers failed you and your parents failed you and everyone else around you failed you, you're an adult. It's a responsibility to find these things out, and we all need to stop making excuses for our deficiencies. And we need to improve the state of our knowledge and understanding, and that means just reading it. And reading the Federalist Papers and understanding the context of what was going on at that time and why. Now, the second reason why the Constitution gets put on the back burner is that the state, and when I say state, I'm including the executive branch, the legislature, law enforcement, and the courts, they do not treat the violation of the Constitution as being a big deal. And this has led to a doctrine of treating statutory laws as being the laws that take precedence, and they have no obligation to meet constitutional muster, and you have to go through a long, hideous, drawn-out court process in order to get anything overturned. That is absolute nonsense, and in evidence, I have a few quotes to share with you, so let's start. Quote 1. A law repugnant to the Constitution is void. An act of Congress repugnant to the Constitution cannot become a law. The Constitution supersedes all other laws, and the individual's rights shall be liberally enforced in favor of him, the clearly intended and expressly designated beneficiary. Marbury v. Madison, 5 U.S. 137, 1803. Quote 2. An unconstitutional law is void and is no law. An offense created by it is not a crime. A conviction under it is not merely erroneous, but is illegal and void, and cannot be used as a legal cause of imprisonment. Ex parte Seibold, 100 U.S. 3171, 1870. Quote 3. An unconstitutional act is not law. It confers no rights, it imposes no duties, affords no protection, it creates no office. It is, in legal contemplation, as inoperative as though it had never been passed. Norton v. Shelby County, 118 U.S. 425, 1886. Quote 4. Where rights secured by the Constitution are involved, there can be no rulemaking or legislation which would abrogate them. Miranda v. Arizona, 384 U.S. 436, 1966. Quote 5. The general misconception is that any statute passed by legislatures bearing the appearance of law constitutes the law of the land. The U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and any statute, to be valid, must be in agreement. It is impossible for both the Constitution and a law violating it to be valid. One must prevail. This is succinctly stated as follows. The general rule that is an unconstitutional statute, though having the form and name of law, is in reality no law, but is wholly void and ineffective for any purpose, since unconstitutionality dates from the time of its enactment, and not merely from the date of the decision so branding it. An unconstitutional law in legal contemplation is as inoperative as if it had never been passed. Such a statute leaves the question that it purports to settle just as it would be had the statute not been enacted. Quote 6. Since unconstitutional law is void, the general principles follow that it imposes no duties, confers no rights, creates no office, bestows no power or authority on anyone, affords no protection, and justifies no acts performed under it. A void act cannot be legally consistent with a valid one. An unconstitutional law cannot operate to supersede any existing valid law. Indeed, insofar as the statute runs counter to the fundamental law of the land, it is superseded thereby. No one is bound to obey an unconstitutional law, and no courts are bound to enforce it. 16. American Jurisprudence, 2D, Section 177. Quote 7. No one is bound to obey an unconstitutional law, and no courts are bound to enforce it. The general rule is that an unconstitutional statute, whether federal or state, though having the form and name of law, is in reality no law, but is wholly void and ineffective for any purpose, since unconstitutionality dates from the time of its enactment, and not merely from the date of the decision so branding it. An unconstitutional law in legal contemplation is as inoperative as if it had never been passed. 16. American Jurisprudence, 2D, Section 256. It's all very straightforward, isn't it? I found references to all that information in under 5 minutes. If I can do that, so can the president, a governor, federal and state congresses, the entire judicial system, and members of law enforcement. That is why everyone who is in office, everyone whose salary comes from taxpayer money, is 100% responsible for their failures to uphold the Constitution and 100% complicit in breaking the oaths that they swore. But it gets even better. Here's the good part. Now this comes from the ruling of the United States Supreme Court shortly after the Civil War, in Ex parte Milligan 71 U.S. 2, 1866, which stands to this day. Neither the legislature nor any executive or judicial officer may disregard the provisions of the Constitution in case of emergency. Now the quote I just read brings us to this. Section 98, therefore, anyone who declares the suspension of constitutionally guaranteed rights to freely travel, peaceably assemble, earn a living, freely worship, etc., and or attempts to enforce such suspension within 50 independent, sovereign, continental United States of America is making war against our constitutions and therefore we the people. They violate their constitutional oath and thus immediately forfeit their office and authority, and their proclamations may be disregarded with impunity, and that means anyone, even the governor and. In light of everything that we've read together, do you begin to see why I call the politicians and law enforcement traitors? It's because they are. By virtue of established rulings and laws and commentary that were set forth ages before me or you or anyone else was even born, that is what they are. They are traitors. This is why we have the absolute right to demand their removal from office and to put them on trial for their lives. It really is that serious, and that is why I am completely deaf to all excuses for why it hasn't already happened. There is nothing sufficient that makes it okay to ignore the egregious crimes that take place in our country by people in office, by people on the taxpayer dole on a daily basis in broad daylight. Now I get that people are scared, and taking on the responsibility to address the problems in our society is overwhelming and terrifying. But if we allow ourselves to become paralyzed or to just sit on the sidelines and let someone else deal with it, that ensures that the authoritarians get their way and there will never be any accountability. Now, one voice may not seem like much, but thanks to social media, we can turn one voice into several million and get the ball rolling and build a public consensus and put pressure where it needs to be applied. And it needs to be applied across the board. Now, recently there have been a few encouraging events or things that at least have the potential to turn out well. Now it's time to capitalize on those things and push that much harder. The opposition is already making their plans to push back to try to overdo things. So we must do the same, and we need to stop being so reactionary. We need to start creating and putting into place plans of our own. Instead of accepting the inevitable loss of civilization, start playing to win. Start playing to win like your life depends on it, like the lives of everyone you love depends on it, because it does. So let's make the Constitution great again. Let's punish those who violate it and let them serve as a warning for other would-be tyrants. Time to act like an American citizen and not just some worthless serf. So, now I turn it over to you. Let's start talking solutions and taking practical action to put pressure on all these public officials, start cracking the whip on them and reminding them of what their place is, which is firmly under our collective thumb as citizens. Let me know what you think and what you have, things that you're doing, things that you're trying to get together with other organizations. Let me know in the comment section below, or come see me on Discord at Blackbird's Brew. There's a link to join in the description box below. I would very much welcome this conversation. I think as individual citizens, we do have the power to make a difference, but we do need to start taking very firm, resolute action and to stop making compromises of any kind. We've already seen what compromises with the authoritarian left does. It's brought us to the mess we're in. So let's do something more productive, shall we? I hope to hear from you soon. And that's all for now, so I'll see you in the next one. Bye.